Hello, Burlokk.
Hello, Grumsworth.
And hello to all you, our lovely listeners, to this, the Preambull, your every so often digest of everything hobby.
Exactly right. And this week, we're going to be bringing you a look at what sort of hobby we've been scavenging our way through, a dive into the realm of the dip, and a look at some eerie fish. And talking of eerie, Grumsworth, how's the world been treating you? What's your hobby agenda been of late?
So this week has seen me scattered to the winds. My focus has been, it's dreadful, Burlokk, awful, right? But there have been some good moments, actually. 3 individually small pieces of amazing hobby I've crafted this week, all very different, although connected loosely by a theme. Right, so I've finished the heavy weapons guy from my cool dog gang, the Knights of Doghead. I'm getting tired of saying their name on this podcast, to be honest, Burlokk.
The Knights of Doghead.
They should be done by now. But they're getting there. There's 3 more to do. Those 3, the leader, 2 gangers, they're in sort of half-finished states. Yeah, if my name's not Grumsworth, I'll have them finished and for all you guys to view on the next podcast. That is a solid gold Grumsworth promise.
I look forward to it.
But the heavy weapons guy, he's now done. I'm calling him James Root. He looks like one of the guitarists from Slipknot. He's got exactly the same mask. He's tall and rangy. I think you can see by the pictures there's some similarities there. I'm really pleased the way this guy came out, actually. It was a struggle because initially he was equipped with an ill-fated heavy flamer. But that's out the window now. That's sitting on a weapons rack, just waiting to be picked up. Someone will have it. But I think he's come together well. The colour scheme has continued on as it has done from the previous members of the warband. He's got a little bit more work done on the rusting of his metal because that crossbow, that's got a lot of metal on it. So there's some additional sort of stages of weathering, I suppose, some rust added that it added a couple more hours onto him, in truth. Although some of those hours were me spent staring at it and thinking, do I do a new rust effect here? No, you don't.
Stick to your formula that you've already got locked in.
You carry on doing what you were doing.
You try and change direction at this point. That way be dragons.
Well, I found the dragons because my focus wandered. So I'm really happy with this guy. He's come out really decent. He fits in really nicely with the rest of them. Moving on to the next bit. So I've been working with a little group of fellow gamers to put together a board for our Necromunda. We got this nice kind of we wanted a really interchangeable board. It's cut into 4 sections. We've used some MDF to base it on. Then we've got some big old chunks of a nice kind of quite stiff foam that we've then mounted some lovely plastic Necromunda style tiles on the top of, courtesy of GW.
Of course, yeah.
We'll throw up some pictures here.
Okay.
So we've got some cutouts. These tiles were actually just complete squares. We've now cut chunks out of them, delved into the foam. We've thrown some filler on the very bottom there, bit of texturing. We're going to make some swampy or concretey areas down there. It essentially allows us to have a basement level on the board. So we've got the regular playing surface, we've got a little area down below, and then when we stack the terrain on, so we'll have kind of three floors, which is what you want for a Necromunda game.
Can't work any better.
Perfect, isn't it? It also allows us to get it on a fairly small sized table, but actually have a lot of playing space, which is really cool. So we got a little bit of that done. We got our hands grubby with some nice cheap filler. And we did some sticking. We threw some PVA around. So that was a nice little hobby day also. And over the coming weeks, hopefully we'll get some paint on it and some other bits and pieces. So I'll bring up some pictures of the work in progress as it comes together.
I expect to see very swift progress on this one. Yeah.
Oh, hell, you are a harsh taskmaster, Burlokk. This is probably why my focus has been so diffuse. Been playing a bit of Fallout 76. One of the elements that I'm really into about it is the building of your player character's camp. Yeah, you've got like kind of lots of structures. You can build floors, walls. I've seen people essentially build sort of mini towns out of this thing, very plush kind of living spaces, decorated with loads of cool appliances, pretty wallpapers, wonderful high-tech lighting, some really stylish looking things.
And these bases are they out in the open world, are they? Or
They are,
I
yeah.
haven't delved much into the base building section. I've played Fallout 76, but I've not really built much of a base. I've set my basic mechanical camp up, but that's
Yeah.
about as far as I've got with it. So is it set out in the open world, or is it a more sort of secluded part of the game where no other players can get to you at and stuff like that? Or?
So you can park your camp anywhere in this huge kind of almost sandboxy world. The region itself, somewhere in America there, it's known as Appalachia. I've sort of gone down a different route with my camp build. My character, Biff doesn't want a mansion. So that's my character's name. He's the guy who spawned the paint scheme for my Knights of Doghead.
Yes.
They are dressed.
Yep. You mentioned that before. I remember now.
They are dressed like Biff. The Necromunda terrain that we've been making is the sort of place Biff would lurk. So there is that also. But Biff's real home is in a tiny corner of this sandbox world. I found a very, very small bridge, barely a bridge at all. It's more like two alleys cut into a small hill, which a train track goes over.
Okay. Sounds quite idyllic, actually. It's quite nice.
It would be quite idyllic until Biff moved in there.
Oh.
Right, because Biff is kind of a sack-hooded, grubby, backwards, mutated cannibal who prefers to spend his days living quietly on his own, catching prey outside of his lair.
We're not talking squirrels and dogs here, are we?
No, we're talking humans or beasts, or I mean any meat that walks his way. Is probably fair game, really.
Human or otherwise.
Human or otherwise, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So Biff kind of, at the moment, he's been living a fairly rudimentary existence under this bridge, popping out like a trapdoor spider every now and then to snag a bit of prey. He was sleeping on a little bag under a tunnel, and I had this lovely building kit, which is supplied with the game there, which allows you to create all these wonderful structures. So I thought, what would Biff do if he could build himself a little house? The answer is to build himself, in real terms, it might be a sort of 10 foot by 10 foot square, hidden away in the dark under this tiny little bridge, wedged into it like.
Okay.
He's dragged a couple of dirty old sofas in there, grubby bed. There's some sort of trophies made out of bone and bits of people. There's a picture of a cat on one of the walls, quite soiled and stuff, but well, it's just something that he scavenged up. He thought he liked the look of it, something about it brings him joy. He's got some candles in there and stuff, and he's got a couple of kind of rickety doors to keep the wind out. And
this is all for the purposes of sort of the immersion of you inside this world, isn't it? Your character. It builds on the roleplay element to an extent, does it? Or
very strongly, yeah. Which is why I think it's important. Well, it was important for me, and it was important for me for about 10 hours of my life this week, that Biff live in a really appropriate dwelling. Like I say, rather than a big, fancy-looking home, all glowing with beautiful lights, topiary hedges out the front, machine guns out of every window, sandbags, not for Biff. Simple, dark, dirty cabin, almost, strewn with rubbish and trophies, hidden under a bridge. What about yourself, Burlokk? I see you swigging from that impressive leather tankard there.
Yeah, this is from Bugman's.
I might have known.
This was actually a wedding present. Bugman's tankard, very, very strong work.
Beautiful.
So what we've had is a trio of hobby activities have all sort of fallen in line quite neatly. First one being the Eldar miniatures that I've been painting with a dear friend of mine. We've got some progress on that. He's got 12 striking scorpions in his army. The power armored, well, not power armor as such, but as good as power armor, chain swords and shuriken pistol wielding aspect warriors.
Mandy Blasters, is it?
Mandy Blasters there, yep, to resemble the pincers of a scorpion.
Beautiful.
Quite thematic. Nice figures as well. These particular ones are resin. We've started getting some base colors on that. Yeah, we sprayed them up green to begin with, dry brushed them with a nice lighter shade of green, added a little bit of yellow to the mix, give it another dry brush over it, so it gave that kind of luminous, almost green highlight to it.
Lovely.
And then washed it right back down with some turquoise contrast paint.
Oh, I like that a lot. Yeah, very nice.
At this stage, they look half done because they are half done. They look somewhat shiny, yet to be varnished with a good healthy amount of Tester's dull coat, no doubt.
The best.
Only the best. But yes, once they're all done and ready, he'll be happy because we've got not just the unit of Dire Avengers from last week. We've also begun work on this big old unit of Striking Scorpions. So once these are done, we'll be about halfway through his little force. So quite good, quite inspiring for us to carry on and get the rest of these bits done because they're coming together quite fast. As I mentioned last week, and I'll mention it again, this is just very, very basic, very, very simple work. But it gets the job done for what my friend wants to achieve. But yes, they're looking nice, looking fairly neat. The weapons, as you can see, they're blacked out, ready for a little bit of incubi darkness. Round 2 of hobby was some character creation for Dungeons and Dragons.
Was it now?
Yes, it was, and you had the joy of being a part of it, didn't you?
I'm afraid so. Yes. I did. It was a proper joy as well, as it always is with your character creation sessions.
So we've got some characters that have been made up. We've got a party of 4. You're one of them. I'll be GMing for our little one shot, which we've got planned. It's going to be good fun. It'll be the first time we've all managed to get around a table again. So we'll get some D&D action going on soon. But the character creation part is always quite good fun for me. I really enjoy just the beginnings of characters. You're all starting at level 1. But having to do it remotely has been a bit of a challenge for some of the guys. I've not been able to sit there in front of them with the book and saying, look, these are the choices you've got. This is what you can see here. Blah, blah, blah. It's more, let me send you some text messages. These guys are new players or some emails to say, these are your choices. So I've had to do some quite long rambling emails and text messages just to outline the process of character creation and sell it to them in a way that's not going to put them off wanting to actually play the game.
Yeah. That's a fine line, isn't it?
It kind of is, yeah, because it can be very deep and very involved. So to sort of counter that process and how cumbersome it can feel at times, I've tried to keep the choices somewhat limited. We're just going to go with the basic character races and classes from the Player's Handbook, just to keep things simple for these guys' first games, and that will help to take away some of that immense amount of choice that you have now with 5th edition D&D, with all the expansion books that have come out and all the extra publications and all the Unearthed Arcana articles, which is the official magazine essentially, which is online. There's such a wealth of character options and even fan-made options, which are very easy to get, very easy resources to get a hold of. The choice can be a bit overwhelming. Even
massively, can't it?
Yeah, even for seasoned players, I think.
Yeah.
So we're stripping it a bit back, going back to the Player's Handbook, going back to basics. So that's kind of the theme of this week's hobby, really, because basic level of painting, some basic level of character creation, new players coming into different hobbies for the first time. It's been nice, but it does bring its share of challenges, shall we say?
Of course, yeah.
And our last bit of hobby from the trifecta has been some play testing. Actually, a very good friend of mine has created his own roleplay game. He's written it from scratch, created a beautiful world in which to play in. Can't name any names yet because he's yet to release all that sort of information. Consider it like an alpha stage of a video game. You know, it's in its first fledgling stage, but he's actually done it. He's written it all. It's been printed, and he's asked us for some feedback, which we've gladly given. Try to be as involved as we can with this game that he's done. What I can say is that it's sort of idyllic, sci-fi, futuristic Earth.
Wow,
and
lovely.
So often you find games are dystopian.
Yeah.
Everything's gone horribly wrong. Well, actually, this is a game where everything's gone really, really well, and humans have
I
evolved
like
to
it.
a point where they're loving life, and they have created something fantastic and very utopian. So that's a nice change of pace as far as world building goes.
Very, yeah. As you say, very unusual. Actually, dystopia is so much easier, isn't it?
It is.
Arguably.
That's as much as I'm allowed to say on it, sadly. But we did manage to get around the table and do a little bit of play testing of this game, which was lovely.
Oh.
Fresh system, quite simple system, but that's what you want. Lots of heavy role play, which is what we all enjoy. That's been pretty good, actually. Aside from that, I had someone come up to me, another good friend of mine.
Oh yeah, one of those.
Let me tell you about this Grumsworth, because this may frame the next hour's conversation. He says to me,
no.
he says to me, Burlokk, I need a hand. I need you to paint something for me. And he says, I need you to paint 10 orc boys, if you would.
If you would. I assume you immediately said no.
Get out of
No, I won't be doing that.
But this was more the commission style request.
Okay.
I think a lot of painters, when they've been in the world of hobby games for as long as we have, may have been asked once or twice in their time. But
it has, I'm afraid, yes, yeah.
There was a question posed to me, which I at first, it was a bit, oh god. I started to chew over this idea in my old brain, and I got thinking really. The idea of painting sort of 10 orc boys, a small request, really, isn't it? But these things often lead to more, because you can't just have 10 orc boys in an army,
especially with orcs. 10 is not enough, folks.
No, that's not even enough for half a mob. I was thinking, where could this lead? But painting it from a commission standpoint as well, started to throw lots of questions up that I've tackled before, but not for a long time. So I thought I'd tell you about it and see what, have a chat with you about it, see what some of your thoughts on it have been, because I've called it a quandary, I guess, the 10 orc indeterminacy, because I don't know what to do with them, really. I don't know how I can approach it. But I was thinking about what products we might be able to use for it, certain techniques I might be able to use to not only make them look good, but save on time and all that kind of thing.
Okay.
What would your initial thoughts be if you were asked such a question?
If I were asked to paint 10 orcs, which, God willing, I never will be, right? I think it's commission painting, or I think that's maybe a grandiose term for 10 orc boys, right? But it's still, if you're being asked to paint something, and it's not one of yours, you're not just doing it to help out a friend or some such. If it's someone who says, I've got these miniatures, I'd really like you to paint them. So they're already confident that you're going to do some sort of job. They might have seen your work already. They might have had a little look at your miniatures in your online galleries, or seen things in real life, been around your house, had a look at your cabinets and stuff like that. So they're expecting a certain level of quality, aren't they? Now, the amount of time that, even if we go for things in a very, very basic style, even those striking scorpions that you showed earlier, they've taken you some time, haven't they?
Yeah.
And your friend there, there's some hours sunk into those.
There was, yeah. The idea of sitting down with a friend and doing something with somebody else, especially if you're approaching it from more of a teaching.
I'll help you out. Or
because he was learning along the way. There's something
of course
else that you get out of that, isn't there? There's something.
I agree.
There's something else. There's other reasons you're doing that with that type of situation, because you're showing somebody how something works. You're seeing them do it with you. You're showing them a technique, watching them apply that technique. So that time that you're spending doesn't seem so long. So actually doing it with somebody, I think I can say from personal experience, I really actually quite enjoy teaching people how to paint.
Yeah, there's a massive difference, isn't there? As you say, teaching someone a few new techniques, or just helping them get paint to brush, sitting down with them. Some people like company to paint, especially when you're first getting into it. And that's really nice. And I think any of us would take an opportunity, especially with a friend as well, who wanted to get into it, who wanted to get their miniatures ship shape and ready to play, we'd definitely be willing to give them our hobby time, wouldn't we? Your friend is, at this point, your hobby child, isn't he?
Yeah, to some extent. Sorry, friend.
Yeah.
But you are my hobby child right now.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll make a lovely hobby father, Burlokk.
Oh, thanks.
Right? But there's a big difference between that and when someone just says, I don't really want to paint these, or I've not got the time, or whatever, which is fair enough. That's fine. But then when you just have 10 orc boys arrive on your desk and you don't want to be painting 10 orc boys, then you have to work out, okay, so this is going to take some hours of my life, depending on what sort of detail I'm going to go in on these guys with. Even out the scales and figure out I should be charging this guy for this. He's willing to pay some money.
So what do I charge? How much do I mean, that's something else, isn't it, really? It's like, how much is your time worth? But really, you want to be spending as little time as you can to get the best results that you can, right? I mean,
absolutely, yeah. Which is kind of, that is the ultimate goal, and that's working efficiently, isn't it?
Yeah,
and working like effectively as well. We all get, well, I'd say we all, it might be a problem unique to me. I don't know. I reckon you suffer as well. I can tell by the look on your face, Burlokk.
Thanks. Trying to disguise it, but it's impossible.
It's okay. It's not that problem. It's a painting one, right? Whereby what happens is you'll do a little bit of detail or you'll throw down some base coat, any part of a miniature. You'll complete that piece and then you'll sit there a while looking at it. You'll move it around on whatever little pedestal you've got it held on, or maybe you're just gripping the base. You'll have a look at it. A few minutes will elapse. You'll go and do the next stage. A few more in between that. A few more in between that. And then a sort of an hour's worth of work spirals into about an hour and a half, right? Which is completely fine. And I love doing that, right, with my own miniatures. Whereas you can't really do that when you're charging by the hour, because you don't at the end want to present this dude with his 10 finely painted, no doubt, orcs and say, bear in mind, 3 hours of this I spent just looking at them and turning around and stuff and thinking about them, right? But so that does come back to working effectively. Did he have a colour scheme? Has he got a sort of an idea of how he wants these 10 orc boys to look like?
Well, actually, yes, he did. And he did say to me that I want them...
Even worse.
Well, yeah. He said, I want them a specific way. Okay. The Bad Moons are a clan in the Warhammer 40k, Warhammer 40,000 universe. And they're sort of renowned as the clan that's the richest, the most powerful. They've got the best guns. They've got the most money, or teeth, as orcs spend teeth instead of coinage. And so they're the flashiest, so they wear the brightest colours, and the typical colour for Bad Moons is yellow.
No.
Yeah.
So this was my worst fear, actually. When you went, I mean, he couldn't have picked a worse. So even if you just use that colour sparingly, yellow is not a great colour to work with at the best of times. It requires quite a lot of energy and effort, doesn't it, to get it looking even half tidy?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that's right. It does take a lot of energy. It's like, okay, well, how am I going to tackle this? What order am I going to put these paints on this model? Because, we all like to start from light and work down to dark. Some of us like to start from dark, work up to light, but it depends on the miniature, doesn't it? It does, when you've got orc boys, they're predominantly a bit grim, a bit dark. The weapons are a bit broken and rusty, but the Bad Moons, they have those really bright elements of their armor plates and stuff like strapped onto that, so that gives you a little bit more of a quandary which you have to deal with, doesn't it?
Your 10 orc quandary. So Bad Moons there, as you say, they're sort of their clan colour is, well, the bright one is yellow, which I've seen Bad Moons painted almost head to toe in yellow, like big old suits of mega armour, head to toe in yellow. But you can also get away with using a lot of darker colours in there as well, just accented with yellow. Yeah. So the way I look at it, there's a couple of ways that you might go about doing that. If he's dead set on painting them bad moon?
This was a conversation we had, actually. It was because I said, "Look,
Okay.
hang on a minute. Bad moons, you know, why do you want to do bad moons? What's wrong with snake bites? What's wrong with death skulls?" And we were talking about color schemes and things, and what you'd
Yeah.
like and what would be easy. I mean, he's the kind of guy who is very pro working quickly and efficiently and getting good results quick. So he was
Okay.
quite on board with the idea, perhaps, of shifting his color scheme slightly. But nonetheless, the idea of painting this mob of 10 orc boys in bright yellows and stuff, it still started throwing those questions at me again of, well,
Yeah.
how would I? How could I? What would be the best way of going about doing this? As it stands, he made the right decision and went with death skulls. Of course, it's the right
Good.
decision, right? So blue,
Good boy.
it's
Yeah.
much more forgiving
Yeah.
than yellow. Okay, so we're
Very
off to
much. Yeah.
but that's by the by. Let's take the bad moon example and run with that for a moment, because
Yeah, I like that because it's an interesting one, and it kind of it throws up the question: how do you paint something nice and rapidly? How are you efficient with your time with a color that is really working against you as far as that's concerned? You know, yellow is a pain to paint. I think it's doubly hard if you're doing it on something like orcs, which have quite a feral, thrown together, scrappy appearance.
Yeah, very wild looking.
Very wild looking. Yeah. So adding yellow into that mix of colours, those more natural colours, as well as their bright green skin, that presents like an interesting challenge, doesn't it?
I mean, the first thing I was thinking about, and perhaps is the first thing we could tackle with this idea, is
Okay.
both the products and the techniques that you'd want to use and or combine to begin with, and to get you through that whole process from start to finish. I mean,
Okay.
if you had to think about products you'd want to use, or take products or techniques, what's one of the first things that comes to your brain?
I think here, when you're looking at painting yellow in any more than one individual miniature, because the treatment's going to be different. The orc boys are they're a troop unit, aren't they? A troop choice. They're rank and file. There's going to be some repetition in the posing of the miniatures. They're not going to be massively exciting.
Yeah.
And you're on the clock. I think I'd first look at the products that I was going to use to complete this task, and a little bit look at it more like a task that happens to be painting, rather than the way you might look at your own miniatures that you're going to spend hours and hours and hours lovingly poring over.
Yeah, because
so
what you've got a detachment, haven't you? You've got a bit of a detachment between I've bought these models, so they are mine. I've chosen these models to buy because they've gone in an army that I've planned to build. So there's none of that.
You want to paint them.
Yeah, you love the models, and that's why you want to have them. You want to paint them. There's nothing emotional about it. So it purely is a task, isn't it? As you just said.
Yeah. So bearing that in mind with this particular task, and you can kind of apply some of this knowledge to the more sort of grubby trench work of your own lovely miniatures as well.
Yeah.
We've all had to do pretty boring base coats and stuff on things that we paint in large numbers.
Yeah.
And I think where I would start is I would go for getting the most paint on them in the least amount of time. I think with this particular task, you're either going to be using an airbrush and throwing your paint on like that, or I think much more rapid. Yeah, I'd go straight for a rattle can.
Yeah, just find a coloured primer, I think, and that was the first thing I thought. Initially, the first thing I thought was brown, and if we're going with the Bad Moon example,
okay,
I thought, well, maybe I'd do the brown, and then maybe I'd get a yellow zenithal on there with a yellow rattle can, or with an airbrush. But then I thought, well, actually, that's just adding a process to this.
adding steps.
That actually doesn't need to be there. So, I mean, we can sort of circle back around to the idea of planning again. We've spoken about it on numerous podcasts now that we've done. The idea of planning being your savior in these moments, because even just thinking, if I'd just gone straight to the shelf, sprayed them brown, I'd be like, oh, well, actually, maybe I should.
Damn it.
You know?
Yeah. So what you've said there, you'd go for, your initial thought was to throw on your brown, and then, as you say, use a zenithal highlight, which, for those of you who don't have paint speak, is blasting straight down from the top of the miniature. So you essentially you automatically highlight the sort of raised portions of the model, as if there was a bright light shining right down onto the model. So you create a contrast between light and shade very, very quickly and easily. It's a really good technique. I'm sure it's something we'll blunder into. We'll probably go there again very shortly.
Oh, I love it.
Right? Yeah, it's great. It's great. It often smells kind of like paint fumey and tastes slightly of acrylic paint.
Yeah, very, very, very wholesome.
Very, very wholesome. Yeah. So we'll talk about zenithal and give you a rundown on that another day. So that would really work. You'd have this kind of brown shadow. You'd have this yellow zenithal down from the top highlight. So I think that's a good place to start. But as you say, you're adding some extra steps there. Although it would be increasing the quality of your output on those miniatures, myself, I'd go straight for a rattle can, a single primer, something like perhaps the army painter, do a really solid range of actual just flat colors out of a rattle can. They go on really, really well, nice and smooth. There's a good wide range. So whether you're doing Blood Angels, Space Marines, your Ultramarines, you're doing some dusty desert looking Tau or some polished shiny Necrons, army painter do a base coat can that's going to be fit for that job. And they do a beautiful yellow.
They do, yeah.
I bathe these guys in a nice, even, flat yellow undercoat. So obviously they'd look terrifying like that. Just these 10 bright yellow orcs. That is a sight that no one wants to see, right? Ever.
Absolutely not.
but I think it is a good stepping off point for these guys to begin with, because that is moments worth of work.
Yeah, bearing in mind you haven't had to put these together, because that's one thing I would instantly say. Please build them and clean the mold lines with with a hobby knife.
I would also say hobby knife or nothing.
Yeah,
but if it's fine if they don't want to take the mold lines off. That's okay.
If that's how they want them.
That's how they want them. Yeah,
their decision, isn't it, at the end of the day? But I would suggest that they're definitely built. That's a must. And yeah, if they have the time to clean them up at least a bit, that's also it does help, because when you're using something like a base primers from a can, when you're spraying, because the colors are so flat and so those imperfections really show up very quickly.
They do. They do, don't they? Yeah.
When you're aiming to paint faster and have better results through speed, I do think that slight extra bit of time cleaning your miniatures up once they're built or before they're built really helps. But anyway, I digress as usual.
No, you digress in the right direction, because we're talking about, although this is adding to the time that you poor souls have to listen to us, it's saving you time in your hobby there. If you clean your miniatures up like nicely, or just get a few of the worst offenders mold line wise.
Yeah, some of the ones in the most obvious places. Talking about products, you talked about rattle cans. You mentioned airbrushes, which can be used, which is a quick way.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's more setup and all that kind of business. So rattle cans are just genuinely quicker.
They are. So they don't yield as good results, I would say, for the most part.
I would agree.
But they are quicker, and you don't need to have an airbrush or a compressor and all of those shenanigans. There's no cleaning them out afterwards. As you say, the prep work is less for that. And we're all about time with this 10 orc conundrum, aren't we?
What I would do next would be to base coat the individual parts of the miniature. For example, some of them wear like fatigues, like trousers. Maybe there's areas of robe or shirt that they're wearing. I'd begin to throw some color onto there, but I'd keep the colors somewhat light. So the lighter end of the spectrum of these colors. If I'm going from a brown or maybe a denim-y kind of blue or gray, I'd stick to slightly lighter than I would for a standard base coat if I was to be building up from a darker color to a light.
So this is all going in the direction that I thought, and it's the sensible direction at this point. So I think what's happening here is we've got our nice bright base coat on, and then we're block filling in some of the details in colours a couple of shades lighter than we might normally use if we were if we were painting a model in the more traditional fashion.
That's it. So I'd go through their areas of their armor plates that might not be yellow. So perhaps some of those armor plates are metal or like a brassy, coppery color. So I'd throw some metallic straight onto the top, on top of the yellow there. I wouldn't worry quite so much about beginning to layer different shades of the metal on top at this point. I'd probably just be throwing down some mid-tones, so sort of middle silvers, some middle coppery kind of colors rather than the dark.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd be using this opportunity just to make them all look exactly the same. So I'd have my almost conveyor belt style going. So I'd pick up the first guy, paint his gun that silver, pick up the next guy, paint the same gun that silver, and I'd keep going till all 10 were done.
The sort of the conveyor belt, you know, you line your guys up, you rank them up there on your desk, and you pick the first guy up, you paint all of his metal areas in your bright silver or whatever it is you're using. And then rather than moving on to the other colors and finishing the base colors one model at a time, you go through and you paint all 10 dooders with their bright, shiny silver guns, choppers, armor. It shows progress more rapidly.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'd like to keep them all basically exactly the same, because that just saves my brain space a little bit more. I would just go straight in, whack all the silver on, whack all the light browns on, whack all the greys on. So at this point, we've got 10 guys. I mean, for example, you start with the silver, you start with the first one, you end up at guy number 10. By the time you can then look at the next color, all the paint on that first one's now dry. So that going through them one by one with the same shade means your drying time is also cut down. So if you're starting one guy from start to finish, there's a lot of time between those paint shades drying off before you can then get your brush back in there. So again, it goes back to that efficiency, doesn't it? You're rolling in every color at the same time. So it saves you paint as well, because you can use the same area of paint.
That's true.
And I think once the skin's then done with their green, I'd maybe throw in some very minor details at this point. Purely, I think with orcs, it'd be teeth and eyes. That's it.
That sounds good to me also. Yeah, I'd be in the same camp. You look for something that is maybe a little bit of a focal point for the model. Tends to be with a lot of sort of human shaped critters. You're going to be looking at their sort of face area, something like this. With orcs, that is a big old face, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Big
They're
old face.
so animated as well, with the huge teeth, massive jaws and everything. So it's the first thing you see, probably that or the weapons. What paints would you use? Would you just go for your standard acrylic, or would you go for something different, a certain type of range of paints? Because I've worked with lots of different sorts of paints, different brands, etc. We've mentioned the primers. They're also very good. They have good acrylics because they match the primers 100%.
They do. They color match them, don't they? Yeah, really nice.
But Vallejo, for example, they do a range of extra opaque, which I would probably think about using for something like this. I do have quite a vast selection of different brands, which not everybody does have, so it might not apply to most painters out there. But Vallejo do an excellent range of extra opaque, which means that you don't need to worry about putting a potential second coat on.
Whatever range you choose to go for, or if you're just working with exactly what you have. Because you're not always going to rush out and buy paints specifically for a 10 orc problem, are you?
No, if you've got the different tools at your disposal, it's worth considering, I think, what ones you would use for it.
Which ones are going to be ideal, yeah. So I think I think both of us would tend to work on this idea, especially for the skin. You'd be looking for a paint which covers the skin, green if you're going for the regular, traditional looking orc, good and green. But you'd maybe want to use the fact that they're undercoated in yellow to maybe bring out a little bit of sort of auto highlighting.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So something which shows some of the undercoat through it a little bit, but concentrates more deeply into the recesses. These guys, these orc boys, they've got lots of they're muscle bound, aren't they? Loads of kind of ragged looking, quite detailed skin actually. Lots of nice recesses.
Good muscle definition. Yeah. Good shadows around the eyes and the mouth.
That's it. Yeah. So a thin green paint would probably do really well there, because it's going to sink into those recesses. It's going to leave the broader, more exposed, flatter areas of their muscle. It's going to catch a little of the green, so change it from the yellow, but it's also going to be lighter than the stuff that's fallen and settled into the creases of their flesh.
So you combine the thinner paint as opposed to my idea of a thicker paint to get a good coverage. You go for a slightly thinner style product to go over specifically the skin, I guess, because you're looking to highlight as part of that one step.
So if you get the right product, you're going to be shading and highlighting over an undercoat that you've already put on there.
Yeah.
So I would consider using something like, I might use a Vallejo green with a load of medium thrown in it.
Okay.
To make it thinner and flow a little bit better. Might use a green wash or ink, because you can get it on very, very quickly. You do have to be a little careful around the areas you want to leave yellow or brown or grey. But I think that that's time well spent, because if you're using like a green ink, all of that is going to do your shading and your highlighting to some degree, particularly on these guys. So sort of looking at selecting the right paint for the task.
There's obviously the contrast range of paints as well, aren't there?
The Games Workshop contrast range,
which for this particular job might actually be quite good to use for the skin. If you found the contrast green, just threw that over that yellow base coat, that's got that sort of good mixture of medium to pigment.
It has,
and it's got that right level of viscosity, I think, hasn't it, to be able to actually, in that single pass of the brush, flow into those gaps, stain all the surrounding area that you've painted, and bring out those highlights gently. So actually, that's another option, isn't it? The contrast range.
It is, yeah, and I think you using the word stain is exactly what you're doing there, isn't it?
Yeah,
that particular range of paints, they are a little bit more like a stain.
A heavy stain, but they are a stain.
They are a heavy stain, and you do have to be a little bit careful with them, because again, if you just bash that green on really quickly, you're going to get it over all of the light colours that you've already put on. And your guys, they want to be wearing their nice brown, grey rags and stuff like that, and then big shiny bits of yellow armor. You don't want splashes of their skin up it. But
so that could be worth thinking about doing the skin first, then after the initial primer's done, wouldn't it? So ordering the colours you do it, because if you know this particular step might be a little messier potentially, contrary to their release notes, I think, from
don't get into that. The
contrast range aren't really, I don't feel, good beginner products. They are good products, I think, but they're quite good in a specific way, and they're quite clumsy to use. So I think actually having the skin as your first step and then going on to the other details is probably the best way to do it.
That's it. I think that's ideal. So we'd go with our yellow undercoat to begin with, suggest a contrast green or a very thinned down, very high medium green,
or an ink
or a wash maybe. You might even get away with a glaze.
You could do, if you wanted your guys to look quite pale, that could be a good option for you. Of course.
Skin second, and then you paint all of their armor, weapons, robes and stuff in, as you've already detailed there, Burlokk. And then we go for some little feature details like whacking in the teeth.
They're quite prominent, aren't they?
Very, and the eyes as well. And then we would have 10 orcs, the 10 orc problem, sort of just base coated, but other than that, all very, very flat.
But you mean that could be that you could happily turn around and say, here you go, they're done now. Totally. They're painted. I mean, there's
nothing wrong with that either.
All right, they're not based. No, and at this point, there's 10 guys, and they're all base coated. Each prominent area of these miniatures has been painted a particular color, but I think there's probably one last step that we could use to make these guys actually look like they've got a slightly more finished look about them. Dare I say, a more professional edge to it.
But it's too late, Burlokk. You've said it, and I will echo it.
We're going to talk about the dip, right? At this point, we say the term dip. The idea is that you would then pop these models with either a very large brush or literally dip them into a can of brown juice.
Brown juice. I mean, soon you'll be able to buy brown juice from your favourite hobby store, Oldman's. There's gonna be cans of brown juice everywhere in that place.
Oldman's brown juice.
Yeah, that's right, and it'll be the
Oh.
best. It'll be the best you can buy.
Oh, yes.
Until that happens, essentially what we're looking at here, the brown juice, whatever company supplies it, it's going to be something that, as Burlokk suggests, you're going to coat your entire model with, head to toe, everywhere.
Head to toe. Yeah.
Big fat old brush. So you get your can of chosen brown juice, and this can come in all sorts of different shades. But the thing that all these brown juices do is they will coat your entire model, right? Adding a sort of a brown filter to the whole thing. So a little bit like the contrast paint being thrown onto the skin there, this stuff is going to find all of the recesses of your miniature, all those kind of nooks and crannies and stuff like this. It's going to seep into there and collect in there most strongly, and it's just going to tint slightly the more broader, flatter, less detailed areas. Yeah. So what it's doing for you is it's giving you shadows and highlights in one easy stroke.
One fell swoop. That's right. And you've summed it up very eloquently there, Grumsworth, because
thank you, Burlokk.
But it does do that, though. It's you get all your all your shadows, and all of your highlights are instantly brought out, and the entire miniature will suddenly look. Oh, that's finished. Actually, you notice it more once it's actually dry, because it does come out, as I said, dip looking quite shiny. But
most often, doesn't it?
Yeah, but then once it's dried, or with a thin coat of matte varnish over the top of it, it takes on a whole new life, and it really does come to life.
It really does, yeah.
But this technique's been around for a long, long time. I mean, I remember working with some fine fellows many moons ago, and we called it the brown ink technique.
Brilliant.
Games Workshop, they released they've had many iterations of Citadel color, and it's gone through many versions of different pot styles, etc. And at one stage, when you had the small black topped and white topped actually screw cap.
Oh yes,
looked like little bullets.
That's it.
They were the worst pots because they would always dry out, and you can never tighten them up properly because anyway, bad design. But either way, as part of this particular range during this time, there was a brown ink. It was just called brown ink. And when you open the pot up, there wasn't a little handy little receptacle where some of the paint ended up, which you could get into nice and easily with your brush. It was literally just an open pot,
bizarre.
But you could get your brush right in there, right? So you picked up the largest dry brush that you could. I think this was about the time when the tank brush was released.
Nice. Appropriately named.
We was all doing a different Chaos Space Marine army at the time, actually.
Oh wow, okay.
And I didn't have Nurgle, although it would have turned out much better if I did. I had a bunch of Night Lords, but again, they were obviously blue, right? Dark blue. Brown still shades blue nicely, so we we decided each of us, there was about 5 of us, each with a different legion. We only did 500 points, so small forces, but we all applied the same painting technique to our individual legions. You had the guy with the red word bearers, you had the Night Lords that I had, you had your Nurgle. Anyway, this brown ink, it just, from this large tank brush, we diluted it with a little bit of water, and we just threw it on top, and we watched as these models that we just base coated really, really roughly, really quickly, and it brought them to life. And we was able to just field these miniatures, these little armies we'd made so quickly.
Really quickly, yeah.
And they looked great. I mean, okay, individually you look at them and you think, oh, don't know about that. But when you take a step back and you look at them on the battlefield, which is where you usually see your models anyway.
That's right, you know it.
They looked absolutely perfect. We'd actually taken the effort to sand the bases before we brown inked them.
That's a very good move. Is that something you would consider doing with this 10 orc problem? So before we go into using any of the brown ink there or anything else like that, you'd consider sanding the bases first, yeah?
I would, yeah, because, well, the way I usually base miniatures, if I'm doing them fast, is PVA, throw them in some sand, and then once that's dry, then the same brown ink stains the sand, and you can then just put a quick dry brush over the top, or not.
Excellent, yeah.
So it's
I like that.
Really, really quick way of doing it. So if you're brown inking or brown washing, or however you want to do it, dipping the entire miniature anyway, you may as well do the sand first. And if you apply that same conveyor belt to them, more often than not, that first one's going to be dry by the time you get to the end. So
Yeah, perfect. Very efficient.
What we ended up doing was we loved this process so much that we actually ended up buying. We went to Games Workshop and we bought all their brown ink. They had about 50 pots in stock, and between a lot of us, we made this we got this old tin can of paint that we obviously emptied.
Yeah.
We tried our best to fill up this tin can with brown ink, diluted it appropriately to the right amount, and then we could literally either attach our miniatures to like a little wire, so we could dip them into this thing, bring them out, and then place them so they could then dry. So we were literally dipping them in this stuff. And the results were exactly the same as but quite the same, because we actually ended up with more brown ink on the miniatures through dipping them than we did so we were obviously a little bit less delicate with it, but the results were nigh on the same. We were getting these models painted up real basic, base coating them all, dipping them in this homemade can of diluted brown ink, and we were just knocking out miniatures so fast. So that's definitely what I would consider. Have you tried the technique yourself with any kind of dip or any kind of other product that I don't know?
I have, yeah. It's not so common these days, I think, but your example shows it up beautifully. So you can apply this brown stuff, this brown juice from Oldman's, or your brown ink from your massive pot that you've collected from Games Workshop, or my weapon of choice, which I'm going to tell you about shortly. So most of this stuff has some interesting properties about it, which essentially make this coat that you've dipped them in shrink as it dries. So it shrinks, and that's how it pushes into all those recesses, leaves all the larger areas basically free of it. You do get a sort of slight staining effect come across. It is okay, and especially for our 10 orcs here, it is completely fine that their yellow will be a little browner in places. It's going to do wonders for the silver of their weaponry, because you're going to have a sort of an auto shading and rust and worn and weathered look about them as well. So that is definitely what I do. I definitely be dipping them. I have used in the past this technique. I've not used it for a while because newer products have come out since I used this, but I totally would go for a dipping technique if I were painting a humongous army, or I was painting 10 orc boys for someone. All right, so this is still relevant, yeah. I actually painted a small Skaven warband, again, nice and grubby, basically brown skin and metal. So not dissimilar to our 10 orc problem we got here. And these guys, again, the same thing, they're undercoated in a single colour, nice kind of quite bright colours before I applied the dip. The metal was just one shade of some shiny balls, kind of silver. So bright, and they look terrifying like that as well. It's like, I hope this works.
Please work.
Please work. And it was a bit like that, because I painted probably a grand total of about 30 or 40 Skaven clan rats, 5 or 10 rat ogres in this. But anyway,
you had to have been confident at that point, otherwise I would have not had the guts.
It's okay. It does a little bit, especially when you're committing that much time to such a large project. So what I did, this was a technique that I discovered way back in the real old days, when kind of dipping was quite a thing among certain communities of wargamers. It was historic ones, right? They would often dip their entire armies and whatnot.
Yeah.
Right? So what I did is I went down to my local DIY store and I brought a pre-filled big can of brown stuff. It was actually a dark oak wood stain.
Oh, okay, wood stain.
Yeah, that's right. So I'd done a little bit of research on this, so I knew roughly what to look for. So I knew I needed something that was going to be pretty dark. Oak was the darkest they had in the shop, so I was like, go for that. I picked up the pot, had a little quick read of the ingredients. Long as it's got loads of polyurethane in it, you're cool.
Because then it will shrink, won't it?
Yeah, that's right. You know it. Yeah. As it dries, that's the stuff that contracts all this dark pigment, pushes it into the recesses, leaves it off the raised areas.
Yeah.
So I go down there, I find my £5 tin of the DIY store's own brand stain in dark oak. So so I prise this can open. This stuff looks like black, like treacle, and actually the consistency is kind of like that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Don't be put off, because it's going to shrink. It's got polyurethane in it. It's going to shrink. Yeah. So I did exactly as you suggested there, as you did with your Night Lords. I picked each of these little Skaven doodles up. I just popped them straight in, took them out. I did shake a little of the excess off.
Yeah, you have to a little bit, because you do get a lot of pooling sometimes, that pooling in the very deepest recesses, which if you just left would probably just become little blobs of dried varnish or paint or whatever. So you do need to be a little bit, careful not to have any big blobs. But more often than not, it just slides right off, doesn't it?
It does. This particular, a wood stain has quite a long dry time on it. Right, so you do have a few moments, although it's best to shake the excess off as quickly as possible. Get down lots of newspaper and stuff, and wear your painting clothes, because this gets proper messy really quickly. But so all of these Skaven just dunked in this pot of black tarry liquid, pulled out there, left for 24 hours. When I came back to them, I mean, they shined like nothing I've ever seen before. They were the most gloss objects in the known universe, right?
What have I done?
They reflected light in absolutely terminal darkness.
Kaleidoscopic Skaven.
Yeah. And at that point, I thought, oh no, Grumsworth, you've done wrong here. You've done wrong here. But I also knew that, as we mentioned a little bit early on, the real final step here that transforms them completely, and rest assured it does, is to whack a really decent matte varnish over.
Yeah.
Because taking all that shine off, suddenly you see all those shadows that have been auto-loaded in with whether it's your brown ink or your own brand oak from around the corner.
Wood
stain, yeah. Or the third option, which we will talk about shortly.
Yeah.
I wouldn't use it for beautiful, really mint, crisp-looking tau or elves.
It can work. I did some high elves, for instance, and they weren't the typical, because I knew I'd be dipping them. I didn't do them in the typical white and blue, or green, turquoisey, bright colours. They were like a red and grey colour scheme. So the
sounds nice.
The dip took quite nicely to that particular scheme. But that's, if you know you're going to adopt a technique like this, choose a colour scheme that is going to work better with. Although it can work on white and blue, really light blues and things, it does tend to take better to the slightly darker, as you say, slightly more grubby colour schemes, or armies that tend to roll around in the mud a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. Yeah. Your grubby orcs, skeletons, any sort of undead.
Oh, perfect for undead.
You can bash out armies of skeletons and zombies in a day. Really good for it. So the last thing there, after your dip of choice, I would always advise Tester's dull coat. It looks like it absorbs light. It is incredible. But Army Painter do a good anti-shine, which is quite decent. It's okay.
Yeah, and they've released their own version of said dip as well, haven't they? I mean, it's been around for a good few years now, actually. So it's quite good, actually. They do 3 different versions. They do a soft, a dark, and a strong tone. Is that right? I think it's soft, dark, and strong.
Yeah.
So if you wanted that slightly more sepia, light brown finish, you could go for the soft tone. If you really wanted that heavy wash down to really like hammer the shadows into your zombies or your skeletons or your really dirty orcs, snakebite orcs or something. I'd probably go with strong tone anyway. Strong tone seems to be pretty good. But it looks like they swept in, stole our good ideas. old army painter.
They stole our good ideas. I mean, I reckon they're good ideas that people had before us. But
Yeah, of course, yeah. There's no new idea under the sun, is there? Let's be honest.
That's truth, Burlokk. That's truth. But so that is the treatment that we'd use for the 10 orcs. Then, do you think?
Yeah, yeah. That is definitely the route I'd go down.
It seems we would both go for the same sort of technique.
Yes.
When painting a chore batch of miniatures and trying to get them decent, because that's what we sort of hang our coat on painter wise, isn't it? We like our work to be good still.
Okay, with something like this, you know you're going to be able to do better anyway, but
Of course.
your justifications are there because, as I said at the beginning, you're not really emotionally attached to these figures, but you still want to make them look nice. Of course you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're painters,
that's
damn it.
right.
We're painters. We want to make our things look good.
We do our best. We do our best. That's how we solve the 10 orc problem.
Yes, the 10 orc quandary, I think, has been solved. Yeah. Grumsworth, I've got a question for you. Do you want to paint 10 orc boys?
No, not really. Hello, all you lovely people. Welcome back to this section of the preamble where the magic happens, where myself, Burlokk, are going to dissect in detail a magic card selected for us by one of our listeners / viewers.
It's one of our loyal viewers from the very beginning, from episode 0. In fact, he's been listening to us.
By the blood. Is there one?
Yes, there's one, a single one. This has been gifted to us by Arindrel. So, Arindrel, thank you very much for your suggestion of this week's magic card.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this is an eerie procession. Well, I mean, pretty creepy at first glance, isn't it? It's a blue card, as you can see. It's an uncommon as far as its rarity goes. It's a sorcery, arcane sorcery, it must be said. And it's by Jim Murray. Well, that's the artwork. It's by Jim Murray. This looks somewhat odd, doesn't it? This is a little off the wall. Not your usual kind of magic card. What do you reckon, Grumsworth?
I think you're right. I think it is kind of off the wall, although there's a good slab of magic cards that sort of are.
Yeah.
I think it's the first one that we've had on this show, though, that it's proper abstract, isn't it? But it is a procession of kind of fish-type beasts with tiny little hands holding some scrolls, drifting round in midair, it looks like, right?
And in what looks like to be some sort of
circle. Yeah. So we're leaning into the abstract with these guys.
I like the way that this one on the front with you can see him more face on. He's holding that scroll. It's got all those runes written on it.
Yeah.
I like how as he would be floating past the one underneath him, that scroll is just going to smack him in the face. Okay, I quite like that. They're just knocking. Yeah. Each one is reading the scroll as it goes past.
Yeah,
I quite like that. But they're going in
mumbling it out.
That's it. They're going in opposite directions, aren't they? The top row and the bottom row. Yeah. That's quite nice. I quite like that. So the composition is very interesting. They seem to be circling this sphere, of this golden sphere in the middle.
Yeah. Okay. So I didn't notice that at first, but you're completely right. Yeah, they're revolving around this floating little golden orb. It looks like, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever that represents, I don't quite know, but that's part of the joy of this card actually, because it does kind of allow you to make up your own mind as to what's going on. It's not obvious, is it? It's not a very obvious piece of work. The background is very simple, and plain. It's just like just a plain color. And it's these fish that have got weird human type mouths, in an odd way. Or I mean, they're not really human, are they? But they're certainly
they've got teeth.
Yeah,
that's true.
These kind of fish look more like goldfish mixed with angelfish. With these creatures, these are themed around the kami.
Okay, yeah.
This card is actually from Champions of Kamigawa, which was quite Eastern themed. Chinese, maybe Japanese. I don't know. They borrowed lots of mythology and ideas from Far Eastern mythology and legend. And these creatures are like a spirit or one of the kami, like a soul that is kind of linked to the material world. And these things would exist in like a parallel dimension almost. I mean, there's a little bit of history to this particular set, where there's like the Kami War is what it themes around. The emperor of the land, guy by the name of Konda, he trespassed in the worst possible way. He managed to kidnap a spirit from the spirit realm, or a Kami. And this particular thing he captured happened to be the child of one of the most powerful spirits in the Kami world. And so when he captured it and brought it back to his material plane in his castle there, that which was taken, I think it was called, because it didn't have a name, but it angered the spirits, angered the Kami so much that they broke down those barriers between the spirit realm and the material realm, and the war began. And it was people, your everyday average soldier or samurai, citizen, fighting against these spirits that were just attacking them from every direction, from every angle. In the story, pardon me, the spirits were linked to your everyday objects. You had your spirit of your forest, you have the spirit of the tree, spirit of the flower. All these spirits started just tearing through into the material realm and attacking everything. Anyway, so I get the feeling that these little things are actually Kami, and they take on the weirdest forms. Yeah, they don't look normal. They're not like your typical ghosts that are just incorporeal. They look like real beings. As they take shape in the material realm, they take on a unique form. And some of them, like these odd little fish creatures here, have little hands that grip these tiny scrolls.
It's what they do.
It's
what those particular ones do.
Kind of what they do. So that might give you a little bit of an indication as to why these things look the way they do. Maybe these particular creatures are spirits of the scrolls. Maybe they're the Kami of the scrolls. Who knows? Maybe that's what they represent. The twisting, turning words that are in all the manner of different scrolls that are written across the land. Maybe this is what these little fish creatures are tied to, what they represent, what they are part of.
Yeah, it would certainly key in with the fact that it is a sorcery card, and it also is marked as an arcane one as well. So these could well be sort of spirits of knowledge, of lore.
That's right.
Of arcane and magic, which might also suggest why they're floating out in this kind of unusual vista. Sort of, it looks kind of sky-like, but it doesn't have to be, does it? It could be spirit realm sort of situation we've got here.
Yeah, could be.
Proceeding as they are, reading their little scrolls, because I agree with you, it looks like they're mouthing the words as they slowly amble by each other.
Although their eyes look blind, isn't it odd?
They do look blind, yeah. Maybe drawn in kind of by the gravity of this tiny orb.
Yeah. Or maybe they're blinded by the words themselves, or the words in these scrolls, or the images that they're reading in these scrolls. Maybe it's blinded them to all other things, and the only thing they can perceive,
spirits, isn't it?
I like what you said about them being tied to lore specifically. In there is a quote from the Lady Azami, who in the game was actually like the keeper of scrolls. She was like the lore.
Okay.
So it makes a lot of sense that these things represent said knowledge, or they represent the ideas within the scrolls. And it kind of feeds in a little bit, perhaps, to the rules within the card, the gameplay rules. Jim Murray done a nice job with this, actually, because he left really it vague enough for you to be able to make your own mind up about what's going on. And with a title like Eerie Procession, he's made them look pretty damn creepy, if you ask me.
He has, yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't like to meet one of these things just floating by me in the middle of the night with their little blind eyes and their wickedly sharp teeth. And
do you know, like, so I agree. They look like, I think they look ugly, blind, kind of buck-toothed, stunted little armed, but in a good way. I think they look quite adorable.
They are in an odd way, in that
weird kind of
creepily adorable. But
I also did have a thought that the scale of this picture could be taken in a couple of different places.
Okay, yeah.
That orb in the middle, like, it could be looking at kind of a planet-sized object here.
I mean, these things could
be absolutely vast, in this kind of ethereal realm, or we could be looking at something that's the size of a humble apple, and these are kind of fish size, yeah?
Or even an atom.
Even an atom.
I mean, that
They
tiny
could
little
be
sphere,
microscopic.
these things could be so tiny. And that's why there's so
like
many
that.
of them.
Yeah, maybe.
That is
Right.
interesting, isn't it? Actually, also with the color, it looks almost as if they're made of the paper they're carrying, doesn't it?
I agree. Yeah, there's something book-like about their flesh and the way they appear.
But
Yeah.
with regard to the rules,
Mhm.
this is, as you mentioned earlier, Grumsworth a sorcery, and it's got the subtype arcane. So it's a specific type of sorcery. It costs 3 mana, 2 generic and 1 blue, and it's essentially in Magic the Gathering lingo, it's a tutor card. So it allows you to search through your deck for a particular card of the arcane variety. So it is an arcane sorcery in itself. It allows you to search your library for another arcane spell. You then get to reveal that, put it into your hand, and then you shuffle your library. So it's quite simple in what it does. It is just a tutor. It allows you to fish for a single card out of your deck. It's a sorcery, so you can only do it in your own turn. So it's somewhat a slow mechanic. It's the idea is that you would, for a lot of blue cards, they're usually, they rely on taking a lot of action in your opponent's turn, using a lot of instant abilities or cards with flash, for example. This is a sorcery, so it allows you to sort of set up your hand for a particular type of play. And that kind of feeds into what this card is. It's an arcane card. It allows you to only search for another arcane card. And bear in mind, arcane sorcery spells were only present in Kamigawa. They haven't been printed in any other set. So that kind of hamstrings its playability a little bit.
Makes it, quite restrictive.
If you're playing block constructed, where you would use cards purely from the Kamigawa
set,
it's not quite so bad because it allows you to construct it in a certain way.
It's a nice way to play that,
It's a nice way to play, because it means you don't really need to deck build lots and lots and lots. You need to have an understanding of deck building, obviously. That being said, it does have a bit of restrictive element to its rules and its gameplay and its mechanics. But it does then allow you in turn to be able to fish for that particular card. It allows you to tutor up that particular card that will help you at the right time. It could be quite useful and allow you to get exactly what you need to get your combo off or get your win, get your game on. But I love this card, not through its playability, which I think is probably about, 50-50 really for me. As far as whether I'd use it or not. But the artwork is so evocative of this set. And it's so weird, like a lot of the cards in this particular set as well, that it makes me really like this card.
It all makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I think this is a card which probably sees very, very, very little play outside of the scenarios you've suggested there.
Yeah.
If you're playing with the Kamigawa block, then this is going to be pretty useful. Like you say, a tutor style card. Help you get through your deck. It's got that kind of that blueness about it. They often have that sort of search through your library to get another one of what you already have, but they're a bit slower at it because this is sorcery here rather than some of the more rapid stuff that they can do.
That's right. And they're a bunch of blind fish, so they're not going to go quick, are they?
It's just what I was going to say. These look like some slow moving fellas.
Yeah.
These are not going to get round to anything, whatever size they are, anytime soon. So sorcery, arcane, that's fine. Yeah. I think, like you say about the art though, it's really beautiful. Like lovely color palette. I really like how sharp a lot of the lines are, but then how a lot of the color is really diffuse and blended. There's interesting scale. It's super weird. Jim Murray, you've done a solid job, I reckon.
Good job, Jim Murray.
Yeah.
Do you want to read us out the flavor text for this card? Because it's quite nice.
Well, let's have a little look. I'm going to ask you, Burlokk, do I need to put on the voice for this?
I don't think we can possibly do Lady Azami the slightest bit of justice that she deserves.
Well, Burlokk, I'm afraid to say I think you're underestimating my my range of voices. Though in years past speculation was not encouraged about the strange ways of the Kami, now we must understand their motivations, if such is even possible. to the mortal mind. So yeah, it's as you say, the flavor text there, that little quote from the lady, master of law as she is saying that we need to get to grips with this other side, these spirits here. We need to understand them. I think she's got her work cut out with these fish.
I think she certainly has. Yeah. They've run off with all her scrolls. Thank you, Arundel.
Nice.
Thank you, Jim Murray. Thank you, Grumsworth.
Yeah. Thank you both of them. Well, thank you for bringing it to my attention, Burlokk. It's an absolute treat. Always nice to get through another one of these cards.
That's right. That brings us to the end of the Magic segment, and sadly,
it does,
towards the close of our podcast for this week.
Yet again, our time has elapsed, dear viewers, fine comrades.
It has.
That old boy's knocking at the door again, isn't he?
He is, yeah. He's at the door asking, if I can't find you here, where can I find you? Where can they find us, Grumsworth?
Now, Father Time can find us behind our own doors, as he's a wont to do, and with alarming regularity as well. But all you folks can find us on all of the links and such displayed around the screen. Have a look at us on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify and Player FM. All the stuff. Yeah. Give us a few thumbs up if you were impressed by our work. Give us a big hardcore thumbs down if you think it was an utter disgrace. If you're lukewarm, just flip a coin and then come back and watch the next one, maybe.
And Grums, it's been a fabulous conversation once again. Sterling work, brother.
This has been the highlight of my evening, Burlokk. This is
very good indeed. And you've prepared a quote for us. So before I run off to get a last few losses in on Heroes of the
Oh no, is it? I mean, is there really time for it? I like your commitment to the cause.
If there's a slight chance I can even out my win-loss ratio, then I'll take it.
Okay.
So as I prepare to do that, please regale our remaining viewers or listeners who are still with us with the finest quote that you've come up with this week.
This is the Primarch of the Iron Warriors, Space Marine Legion, Perturabo. And this is, for any of you in the know about such things, this is a quote from him before his fall to chaos and all that sort of business. At this point, he was just a good, sturdy, loyal bod. He was always a bit of an unusual one. Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum upon which to place it, and I shall move the world.
You've been listening to The Preamble. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, and many other podcast platforms. And if you want to contact us, just send an email to thepreamble@gmail.com or find us at The Preamble on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. Your hosts were Grumsworth and Burlokk, brought to you by roguesgaming.com. Special thanks to our contributors, our spotlight artist, and of course, to all of you. See you next time.